3 scary true Chuck E. Cheese stories. Story 1. The Birthday Party. My name is Victor, and I was 34 years old when this happened. It was a Saturday afternoon in late October, and I had taken my 6-year-old daughter Lily to a classmate's birthday party at a Chuck E. Cheese in Mesa, Arizona. The place was packed with screaming kids, flashing arcade lights, and that particular smell of cheap pizza and industrial carpet cleaner. It was around 2:15 p.m. when I first noticed the man standing near the ball pit, and something about the way he was watching the children made my skin crawl. If you are new to this channel, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you are listening from tonight. Because what happened at that birthday party is something I will never forget. The Chuck E. Cheese was located in a strip mall off the main highway, sandwiched between a nail salon and a discount furniture store. I had been to this location maybe 3 or 4 times before with Lily for various parties. It was always the same controlled chaos. Kids running everywhere. Parents sitting at tables looking exhausted, employees in polo shirts, trying to maintain some semblance of order. The animatronic stage with the creepy robot band that no one really watched anymore. The prize counter with all the cheap toys that kids would trade their tickets for. Lily ran off to find her friend Madison as soon as we walked in. The birthday party was set up at a cluster of tables near the back, decorated with pink balloons and a banner that said "Happy Birthday Madison" in glittery letters. There were maybe 12 kids total, all from Lily's first grade class, and about 15 adults scattered around keeping an eye on things. I grabbed a seat at one of the tables, ordered a soda, and settled in for what I expected to be 2 hours of noise and chaos. About 30 minutes into the party, I got up to check on Lily. She was playing in the ball pit area with 3 other girls laughing and throwing the coloured plastic balls at each other. I stood at the edge of the netted enclosure, watching her play, when I noticed the man. He was standing on the opposite side of the ball pit, about 20 feet away from me. Mid-50s, average height, wearing khaki pants and a plain blue button-down shirt. He did not have a child with him. He was not talking to anyone. He was just standing there, hands in his pockets, watching the kids in the ball pit. His eyes moved slowly from child to child, lingering on each one for several seconds before moving to the next. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe his kid was in there, and I just had not noticed. Maybe he was a grandparent waiting for his grandchild to finish playing. There were plenty of innocent explanations. But something about his posture, about the intensity of his gaze, made me uncomfortable. I walked around the enclosure to get a better look at him, trying to seem casual about it. As I got closer, he turned and looked directly at me. Our eyes met for maybe 2 seconds. Then he smiled a thin smile that did not reach his eyes and walked away toward the arcade section. I watched him go, my heart beating a little faster than normal. I went back to the party tables and sat down. I could not see the man from where I was sitting, and I told myself to relax. Lily was fine. She was having fun. I was just being an overprotective dad. About 45 minutes later, they brought out the birthday cake. All the kids gathered around the table to sing happy birthday to Madison. I pulled out my phone to take a video of Lily singing. Through the screen, I scanned the crowd of children looking for my daughter's face. That is when I saw him again. He was standing at the edge of the group of kids, not with the other parents who were clustered behind the children, but actually among the kids themselves. He was looking down at them with that same intent expression, and he was standing directly behind Lily. I dropped my phone and pushed through the crowd of parents. I grabbed Lily by the hand and pulled her toward me, probably more roughly than I should have. She looked up at me confused and a little scared. I asked her if she knew that man, if he had talked to her. She said no, she did not know him. What man was I talking about? I turned around to point him out, but he was gone again, vanished into the chaos of the restaurant. My hands were shaking. I looked around frantically, trying to spot him. Madison's mom, a woman named Jennifer, came over and asked if everything was okay. I told her there was a man acting strangely, that he'd been standing right behind the children. She looked concerned, but also a little skeptical. She said she had not noticed anyone unusual. I decided to find a manager. I walked up to the front counter and asked to speak with whoever was in charge. A young woman in her 20s came out from the back and introduced herself as the shift supervisor. I explained the situation described. The man told her he did not seem to have a child with him and was watching the kids in a way that made me uncomfortable. She nodded and said she would keep an eye out. She said they had a policy where adults couldn't enter without a child, and everyone got matching stamps on their hands when they entered. She offered to check the man's stamp if she saw him. That detail stopped me cold. I had not thought about the stamp system. Every Chuck E. Cheese has it. When you enter, they stamp the adult and child with matching invisible ink stamps. When you leave, they check that the numbers match. It is supposed to prevent exactly this kind of situation. So how did this man get in without a child? I went back to the party, keeping Lily close to me. I did not let her go back to the play areas. She complained, said I was being unfair, but I did not care. Something was wrong, and I was not going to take any chances. The party ended around 4:30. Parents started gathering their kids, saying goodbyes, collecting goodie bags. I had my hand on Lily's shoulder the entire time, steering her toward the exit. We got in line behind several other families to have our stamps checked. The teenage employee at the door had a UV flashlight. She checked the mum and 2 kids in front of us. Then it was our turn. She scanned my hand, then Lily's hand. The numbers matched. She smiled and waved us through. As we stepped through the door into the parking lot, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We were out. We were safe. I hurried Lily toward our car, which was parked about 6 rows back from the entrance. We were halfway to the car when Lily said, "Daddy, that man is following us." I spun around. The man in the blue button-down was walking across the parking lot about 50 feet behind us. He was not rushing. He was not running. He was just walking that same measured pace, heading in our direction. I picked Lily up and ran. I fumbled with my keys, nearly dropping them twice. I got the car unlocked, threw Lily into her car seat, slammed the door shut. I jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine. As I was backing out of the parking spot, I looked in my rearview mirror. He was standing at the edge of the parking lot, near the entrance to the strip mall. He had stopped walking. He was just watching us leave. And he was writing something down in a small notebook. I drove straight to the police station. I filed a report, gave them his description, told them everything. that had happened. The officer was sympathetic, but said there was not much they could do. The man had not actually done anything illegal. He had not touched anyone, had not made any threats. Being creepy was not a crime. A week later, I called the Chuck E. Cheese and asked to speak with the manager. I wanted to know if they had reviewed their security footage, if they had identified the man. The manager told me they had checked. The footage showed the man entering the building at 1:45 p.m. He had entered alone without a child. The employee at the door had been distracted helping another family and had not stopped him. He had never received a stamp. He had been in that building among all those children for almost 3 hours, and no one had noticed until I said something. The manager said they had reported it to corporate and were reviewing their security procedures. She apologized for the breach. But here is what haunts me. The police never identified him. He was never seen at that location again. But about 6 months later, I saw a news story about a man matching his description who'd been arrested at a Chuck E. Cheese in Tucson, about 2 hours south of Mesa. He had been caught trying to leave with a child that was not his. The child's mother had noticed something was wrong and confronted him. He claimed it was a mistake, that he thought it was his granddaughter. But he did not have a granddaughter. He did not have any grandchildren at all. When I think about that day in Mesa, I think about how close I came to being the parent in that news story. If I had not been watching, if I had not noticed him, if I had let Lily out of my sight for just a few minutes longer, the stamp system had failed. The employees had failed. The only thing that kept my daughter safe was a father's instinct that something was not right. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong about a person, about a situation, do not talk yourself out of it. Do not worry about being rude or paranoid. Your instincts exist for a reason, and sometimes they are the only thing standing between your child and someone who wants to hurt them. Story 2. The Closing Shift. My name is Ryan. I was 19 years old and working my first real job at a Chuck E. Cheese in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. It was February, dead of winter, and business was slow during the weekdays. I was scheduled to work the closing shift on a Wednesday night, which meant staying until 11 p.m. to help clean up after the restaurant closed at 9. What happened during those 2 hours after closing has stayed with me for over a decade. Hit that subscribe button and keep listening, because I still get chills thinking about that night. Working at Chuck E. Cheese was exactly as weird as you would expect. During the day, it was constant noise and controlled chaos. But at night, after all the families went home, the place transformed into something else entirely. The arcade machines went dark. The animatronic stage sat silent and still. The ball pit looked like a sea of colored plastic waiting to swallow you whole. And the back rooms, the places customers never saw, those were a whole different world. That Wednesday night, we closed at 9 p.m. as usual. The last family left around 8:45. My manager that night was a guy named Doug, mid-40s, been working there for like 15 years. There were 2 other employees working the close with us. A girl named Brittany, who worked the prize counter, and a guy named Marcus, who worked the kitchen. 4 people total to clean a restaurant the size of a small warehouse. Doug gave us our assignments. I was on arcade and floor duty. which meant I had to wipe down all the machines, pick up any trash sweep, and mop the main floor. Brittany had the party room and front counter. Marcus had the kitchen. Doug would supervise and handle the cash and paperwork in the back office. I started my routine around 9:15. The main lights were still on, but they had dimmed the arcade section to save electricity. That meant I was working in semi-darkness, moving between machines with a spray bottle and a rag. The silence was the strangest part. During operating hours, the noise was constant. Music game sounds, kids screaming the animatronic show, playing every 30 minutes. Now, it was just the hum of the refrigeration units and the occasional clank from Marcus in the kitchen. I was wiping down a skee-ball machine near the back of the arcade when I heard footsteps. Heavy footsteps like boots on the tile floor. I stopped and listened. They were coming from somewhere near the front of the building. I figured it was Doug or maybe Brittany walking around. But then I heard Doug's voice from the back office, which was in the opposite direction. He was talking to someone on the phone, his voice muffled, but distinct. And the kitchen was on the other side of the building from where the footsteps were coming from. I walked toward the front of the arcade section, trying to figure out who was walking around. The footsteps had stopped. I stood there in the dim light listening. Nothing. Just silence. I shook it off and went back to cleaning. Old buildings make weird noises. Pipes settling HVAC systems, kicking on and off, that kind of thing. I told myself it was nothing. About 20 minutes later, I moved to the ball pit area to clean up. Company policy was that we had to rake through the ball pit every night to check for lost items and, honestly, to make sure no kid had fallen asleep in there. It happened more often than you would think. I grabbed the long-handled rake we kept in the storage closet and started pushing through the plastic balls. The ball pit was maybe 15 feet by 20 feet, about 3 feet deep. Thousands of colored plastic balls. As I raked through them, I found the usual stuff. A shoe, some tokens, a pacifier, a half-eaten slice of pizza. I bagged everything and kept raking. I was about 2/3 of the way through when my rake hit something solid. Something big. I pushed the balls aside and saw what looked like a blanket bunched up at the bottom of the pit. That was strange. We did not have any blankets that matched this one. It was dark green, almost like a sleeping bag. I pulled it out, and that is when I realized it was not just a blanket. It was a sleeping bag. An actual sleeping bag rolled up and shoved to the bottom of the ball pit. Stuffed inside the sleeping bag was a backpack. Inside the backpack, I found some clothes, a water bottle, some granola bars, a flashlight, and a small notebook. Someone had been living in this building. I dropped everything and ran to find Doug. I found him in the back office, still doing paperwork. I told him what I found. He looked at me like I was joking. At first, then saw the look on my face and followed me back to the ball pit. He stared at the sleeping bag and backpack for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and called the police. While we waited, he told Brittany and Marcus to stop what they were doing and come to the front of the building. He didn't want anyone wandering around alone. The four of us stood near the front counter, watching the entrance, waiting for the police to arrive. That is when Marcus said something that made my stomach drop. He said, "Hey, did anyone check the animatronic room?" The animatronic room was a small space behind the stage, where the robot characters were maintained and stored. It was always locked during operating hours. But at night, during closing, the door was sometimes left open for maintenance access. I looked at Doug. Doug looked at the door to the animatronic room. It was at the far end of the stage, partially hidden by a curtain. From where we were standing, I could see that the door was open about 6 inches. Doug told us to stay put. He grabbed a flashlight and walked toward the stage. I watched him climb the 3 steps up to the platform, push aside the curtain, and approach the door. He shined his flashlight through the gap and looked inside. He did not scream. He did not say anything. He just stood there for about 5 seconds, frozen. Then he backed away, slowly came down the steps and walked back to us. His face was white. He told us to get outside. Now. Do not grab your stuff. Do not stop. Just go. We went. The police arrived about 8 minutes later. 4 officers entered the building while we waited outside in the parking lot. It was freezing, maybe 20 degrees, and none of us had our coats. But nobody wanted to go back inside. About 30 minutes later, one of the officers came out and talked to Doug. Then Doug came over and told us what they had found. A man had been living in the animatronic room. There was a makeshift bed made of moving blankets and cardboard. There were empty food containers, water bottles, and a bucket that had been used as a toilet. There were holes drilled in the wall that let him see into the main dining area and the arcade. And there were photographs. Dozens of photographs printed on regular paper of children who had visited the restaurant over the past several weeks. The man was not there when the police searched. He must have heard us talking and slipped out through the emergency exit in the back. The alarm on that door had been disabled. Nobody knew how long it had been broken. They never caught him. The police investigated, reviewed the security footage, but the cameras in the animatronic room had been disconnected. Whoever this person was, he knew the building, knew the security systems, knew how to avoid being seen. The notebook I found in the backpack had names in it. Children's names. Some of them had dates next to them, dates that corresponded to birthday parties that had been held at that Chuck E. Cheese. The police contacted those families. As far as I know, none of the children had been harmed. But the fact that he had their names, had been watching them, taking pictures of them, it was enough to terrify every parent in that community. I quit the next day. I could not go back in that building knowing what had been happening while we served pizza and handed out prizes. Some nights when I close my eyes, I can still see those animatronic characters on stage frozen in their poses, and I wonder if he was behind them the whole time, watching through those holes in the wall, watching all of us. Story 3. The Parking Lot Encounter. My name is Danielle, but everyone calls me Danny. I was 27 when this happened, a single mom with a 4-year-old son named Caleb. It was a Sunday afternoon in early September, and we had just spent 3 hours at a Chuck E. Cheese in suburban Houston, Texas, celebrating Caleb's friend's birthday. The party was over. Caleb was exhausted and cranky, and I was ready to go home. It was around 4:45 p.m. when we walked out to the parking lot. The sun was starting to get low in the sky, and I had no idea that the next 20 minutes would be the most terrifying of my life. Before I continue, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you do not miss any of these stories. And stay until the end, because the way this story ends still haunts me. The parking lot was one of those large shared lots that service the entire strip mall. Chuck E. Cheese was at one end, and there was a grocery store at the other end, with various smaller shops in between. I had parked near the middle of the lot, maybe 200 feet from the entrance, because it had been packed when we arrived. Caleb was tired and dragging his feet. I was carrying his goodie bag from the party and trying to hurry him along. The heat was still oppressive, even in September, that thick Houston humidity that makes you feel like you are breathing through a wet blanket. We were about halfway to our car when I noticed a white SUV parked next to mine. It had not been there when I arrived. The windows were tinted dark, too dark to see inside. The engine was running. I could hear the low rumble and see the heat waves coming off the exhaust. Something about it made me slow down. I have always been cautious. Being a single mom does that to you. You learn to pay attention to your surroundings, to trust your gut when something feels off. And something about this situation felt off. I stopped walking and pretended to look for something in my purse. I was stalling, trying to figure out what was making me nervous. The SUV just sat there, engine running, nobody getting in or out. It was parked very close to my driver's side door, close enough that I would have to squeeze between the two vehicles to get in. I made a decision. I took Caleb's hand and walked past my car, continuing toward the grocery store at the other end of the lot. I wanted to see if anyone would get out of the SUV. Nothing happened. The SUV just sat there. We walked into the grocery store, and I found a spot near the front windows where I could watch the parking lot. I bought Caleb a juice box from the cooler, and we stood there drinking it while I watched my car. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. The SUV did not move. Nobody got in or out. But I noticed something. The SUV was parked unevenly angled toward my car in a way that would block my driver's side door completely. I called my brother. His name is Marcus, and he lives about 15 minutes away. I told him where I was, and that there was a vehicle parked next to mine that was making me uncomfortable. He said he would come right away. While I waited, I kept watching. Around the 12-minute mark, the passenger door of the SUV opened. A man got out. He was tall, probably 6'2", wearing jeans and a dark t-shirt. He walked around to the back of the SUV and opened the hatch. He stood there for a moment, looking into the back, then closed it and got back in the passenger seat. That was when I saw the second person, a figure in the driver's seat barely visible through the tinted windows. 2 people sitting in a running vehicle parked awkwardly next to my car in the middle of a parking lot for almost 15 minutes. Not shopping, not going anywhere, just waiting. My brother arrived about 20 minutes after I called him. He pulled his truck into the spot on the other side of my car. He got out and walked over to me at the grocery store entrance. I pointed out the SUV and explained what I had seen. Marcus is a big guy, former military, not someone you want to mess with. He walked directly toward my car, passing close to the SUV. As he walked by, he looked into the driver's window. He later told me he could not see much through the tint, but he could make out 2 figures inside both, watching him. He got to my car and opened the driver's side door, which required him to squeeze past the SUV. He stood there for a moment, making it clear he was not going anywhere. Then he waved for me to come over. I took Caleb and walked quickly across the lot. My heart was pounding. When I got to the car, Marcus helped me get Caleb into his car seat. The whole time the SUV just sat there, engine running, occupants watching. I got in my car. Marcus got back in his truck. I backed out of the spot, and Marcus positioned his truck so that the SUV could not follow me without going around him. I pulled out of the parking lot and onto the main road. I checked my rearview mirror constantly. The SUV did not follow. I thought that was the end of it. A scary encounter, but nothing had actually happened. I told myself I was probably overreacting. Maybe they were just waiting for someone and happened to park next to me. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. 3 days later, I saw the SUV again. I was driving home from work, taking my usual route through the neighborhood. I stopped at a red light about 2 blocks from my house. I happened to glance in my rearview mirror, and there it was. The same white SUV with the dark tinted windows. 3 cars behind me. My hands started shaking. I did not go home. Instead, I drove straight to the police station. I parked in the lot and waited. The SUV drove past the station and kept going. I got out and went inside to file a report. The officer took down my information and the description of the vehicle. I gave him the partial license plate number I had managed to memorize during my 20 minutes of watching at the grocery store. He said they would look into it. A week went by. No sign of the SUV. I started to relax, started to think maybe it had been a coincidence. Then I got a call from the detective who had been assigned to my case. He asked if I could come down to the station to look at some photographs. I said yes. When I got there, he showed me a series of photos. One of them was the SUV. He asked if that was the vehicle I had seen. I said yes, that was definitely it. Then he showed me photos of 2 men and asked if I recognized either of them. One of them was the tall man I had seen get out of the passenger side. The detective told me they had found the SUV 3 days earlier. It had been abandoned in a parking garage downtown. Inside they found zip ties, duct tape, a tarp, and a Polaroid camera. They also found photographs. Photographs of women taken from a distance without their knowledge. Women in parking lots, women getting into their cars, women walking with their children. One of the photographs was of me. It had been taken that day at the Chuck E. Cheese parking lot before I walked into the grocery store. I was holding Caleb's hand, walking between the cars, looking down at my purse. I never saw anyone taking my picture. I never knew I was being photographed. The 2 men were still at large. The detective said they were persons of interest in several other cases across the Houston area. Cases involving women who had disappeared from parking lots. Women who had never been found. I moved 3 weeks later. Different city, different state. I told my job I had a family emergency and could not continue working there. I pulled Caleb out of his preschool and enrolled him somewhere else. I changed my phone number, my email, everything. It has been 4 years now. They never caught those men. As far as I know, they are still out there, still driving around in parking lots, still watching, still waiting for the right opportunity. I think about that day at Chuck E. Cheese all the time. I think about what would have happened if I had not noticed the SUV. If I had walked straight to my car and tried to squeeze past it to get to my door. If I had been looking at my phone instead of paying attention to my surroundings. I think about how close Caleb came to losing his mother. And every time I park my car now anywhere, I look at the vehicles around me. I look for tinted windows. I look for running engines. I look for people who are just sitting there waiting. Because sometimes the most ordinary places are where the most dangerous people are hunting. And sometimes the only thing that saves you is trusting that voice in your head that says something is wrong. Those were 3 true scary stories from Chuck E. Cheese. These are places we take our children for fun, for birthday parties, for innocent memories. But as these stories show, danger can hide anywhere, even in a building full of arcade games and singing robots. Always watch your children. Always pay attention to the people around you. And always, always trust your instincts. Because the person standing too close, the car parked too near the footsteps in an empty building, they might be nothing. But they might be everything.